going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Fantasy scoring returned in week 2, and it was a reminder not to overreact to 1 week of games. I would say waiver wire for this week is okay. It's decent, not amazing, but the amazing weeks in the waiver wire are when we have a ton of injuries, which we, of course, do not want. So we'll start off by going over who I think the main targets should be, and then we'll go position by position to everything after that. I think the 4 clear top targets this week are Bhayshul Tuten, Juwan Johnson, Wan'Dale Robinson, and then Daniel Jones, which is kind of fun because no matter what you need, there is a top option at each position. I think Tuten is worth a number 1 claim if he's available in your league. Remember last week we were saying there wasn't anyone really worth that top claim. He's available in a shockingly high amount of leagues right now, only rostered in 40% of ESPN leagues, 45% on Sleeper. That's pretty wild. I could see before the Tank Bigsby trade, but after that went through, it was pretty obvious people should be going after Bhayshul Tuten. He looked fantastic in camp. He's looked great whenever given opportunities so far this season. Clearly, with the trade, the Jaguars think, whether or not they want him to be the number 1 running back, they trust him enough to where, like, if Etienne started to slow down, if Etienne got hurt, he would be the top guy. They would trust him in that role. They wouldn't have traded away Tank Bigsby if they did not believe that. But I just want to reiterate, Etienne is the starter right now. He's getting more opportunities. He's the more valuable player on this team, and he's playing really good, right? Even though Tuten also looks good, it's not like Etienne looks bad. So Etienne will remain the starter. You are starting Etienne next week. We'll go over in the rankings video whether you can start Tuten as a low-end starter. I actually might have to in one of my leagues because running back 2 is not great for me in that one. And if you're in those situations, it's great because right now, if he's going to get around like 10 opportunities each week, that is on the fringe of like, okay, he can break a long one. He can add in a couple receptions there. Maybe he scores a touchdown. Like there are opportunities there where it's not the worst play in the world if we're expecting 10 opportunities, but it's the long-term upside as to why he's worth the number 1 claim. Worth, I think, around a quarter of fab. So in like a 12-team league with like, 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex, 6 bench spots, a classic setup, I would spend around a quarter of my fab to get him. And like as you go down into 10 and 8 team leagues, you can spend less. As you increase, you're going to have to spend more. But I think that's where he's valued at because long term, we know every single year Etienne breaks down. Every year he starts off better and then he gets less and less efficient as the season goes along. He gets injured at a higher rate. Like he just is worse as the season goes on. And I think Tuten's going to be the reverse. So he will be the starter, I think, by midseason. And that'll be something we're starting every week. So you definitely want to go after him as a top guy this week. After Tuten, I think it's Juwan Johnson. The Saints are playing extremely fast, and that's resulted in 11 and 9 targets over the first 2 weeks for Juwan Johnson. They're going to lose most of their games this year. So at least for right now, Juwan is playing, 95, 98% of the snaps, the clear top tight end, a heavy target share in each game. It wasn't like he had a million targets in 1 week and none the next week. Like consistent, heavy target share in both weeks. We'll see when Taysom Hill is able to return, but I don't think it's going to be early in the season. For right now, in the short term, Juwan Johnson is a must start every single week, and that should not be available at tight end on free agency. So it's not like we think the Saints going to be great, but as we talked about in the summer, it's like even if they're not that good, if we can actually identify a couple players they're using at a heavy rate, and they're going to run as many plays as we think they will, and they're going to be trailing most spots and needing to throw the ball, there's going to be enough volume to go around to where it should be pretty consistent for these pass catchers. Now, it's a different situation from like the Cleveland Browns, right? That's kind of what's going on for the Browns right now is they're dropping back so much that they're just spreading the ball around to a bunch of players. It's like, well, there's heavy volume because they're throwing the ball 40 times each week. The Browns have a situation where they're going to switch quarterbacks eventually by midseason, and it's going to just decimate the value of all these guys. That's not the situation for the Saints. Either Rattler's going to keep playing as a quarterback or they go to Shuck, but it's not like they're going to all of a sudden go to a run-heavy game script or they're going to go lower in pace, right? Not going to run as many plays. So we can actually expect the Saints to continue this heavy volume moving forward, which makes Juwan, again, a very, very strong guy to go after. After Juwan, I think it's Wan'Dale Robinson. I said in, I think, 2 videos last week that it's really nice to see him getting downfield usage. The reason you wouldn't have drafted him last year or this year after having 140 targets last season was because all of those targets were like 2 yards downfield. So you don't even care that a guy's getting like 7 or 8 targets because it was like his ceiling was like 40 receiving yards, right? But Week 1, 6 for 55. Week 2, 8 for 142. And 1, he is actually getting usage deep downfield. That is fantastic. And again, he was 10th among all wide receivers with 140 targets last season. Those targets seem to still be there this year, except they're more upside. Right now, he's 15th in targets among wide receivers through 2 weeks. So if he's available in 75% of leagues, and it seems like he's trending towards being top 20 in targets with downfield usage, that has to go way up. He has to be rostered in at least 85% of leagues in the next 2 weeks. Then finally, Daniel Jones. I mean, my goodness, 71% completion rate, no interceptions, 294 passing yards per game, 5 total touchdowns. And in one of those games, it wasn't 2, it was 1 horrible opponent against the Dolphins. But last week against the Broncos. So he's actually played a very, very good defense, and he still crushed it. Like, I have not done the week 3 rankings yet, but Daniel Jones at this point has earned must-start status. They're even giving him goal line sneaks, and it was like they tried it like 4 times in a row. It like just wasn't working, and it's like, okay, you guys can give Jonathan Taylor a try at the goal line. And they're like, no, when we get with the one, we are sneaking it with Daniel Jones. That's really, really valuable for a quarterback. That's 6 points right there. If they're not doing that sneak, you're taking a huge chunk off his projection. At this point, we can project him for a good amount of rushing yards and a high share of rushing touchdowns, along with obviously, I project 99% of the passing volume. Like, my goodness. I mean, he looks fantastic. I did not think he looked this good. I thought that when whoever the starting quarterback for the Colts was any week, they'd be a starting option for us. But starting option is not the same as must start. And at this point, Daniel Jones must start. He should be rostered everywhere. So those, I think, are the 4 clear top options who you should be going after most heavily. Now I'll go position by position, talk about kind of the secondary options at each spot. I would say wide receiver is the next most appealing position as a whole. There's a decent amount of wide receiver options. So after Wan'Dale, I would say it's Darnell Mooney, Troy Franklin, Romeo Doubs, and Alec Iamaner. Mooney didn't have a great game this week, but no one did in Atlanta. It was kind of a weird game where Atlanta had a really difficult time moving the ball through the air against the Vikings, which makes sense because the Vikings are one of the best defenses in the NFL. But then the Vikings also kind of fell apart on offense because Atlanta, and we'll get to them in the defense streaming video, Atlanta's been great. Atlanta's been awesome on defense, very unexpected. They invested heavily, but that doesn't always work, right? You can't always just go after, free agents and rookies and it all works out. They all end up being really good and the defense is fixed, right? We see plenty of times teams invest and it doesn't really work out because the players don't hit, right? You're not going to hit on all of your picks, all your free agents. It kind of seems like Atlanta has. And so Atlanta's been great on defense. They really shut down the Vikings. Again, early. It's only been 2 weeks. And so we don't know yet, is that going to happen every other week for the Vikings? Because McCarthy is still very young, very raw, and it's not really clicking for him yet. And the accuracy hasn't been amazing. Or is it the Falcons? We just don't know the answer to that just yet. But it seems like Falcons are good. But anyways, we'll kind of get to them a little later on. But the point is, it was a weird game for the Falcons in that they couldn't get going, and then they just didn't need to because the ground game was good enough and their defense was good enough to where they didn't have to throw the ball. So most weeks they're going to have better passing volume than they had this last week, but I don't care. The underlying metrics were good for Mooney. 86% of the snaps leaves without an injury. That is all we wanted. We wanted him to go out there, get a full snap share in, command some targets, and leave healthy. And that's what happened. So he's not going to be a weekly must start or anything, but he's the clear number 2 wide receiver on a very good passing offense who will have flex upside in the right spots, going to play half his games in a dome. That is a wide receiver you want on your bench. Definitely go after him. After Mooney, I think it's Franklin. He was so horrible in his rookie season. So it's been difficult to trust the hype in the summer because in camp, they were talking about how good he did look, but it was okay, but he was so bad as a rookie. Do you trust it? But he's gone out there. He's commanded 15 targets over the first 2 weeks. Really strong game this last week. 8 for 89 and a touchdown, 83% of the snaps. I still don't fully trust him just because not only the player, but there's just so many playmakers. There's so many wide receivers. I would assume over time, Evan Ingram gets more targets. The running backs aren't going anywhere. So there's so many guys there that it could easily just be next week. He has 3 targets, 1 catch for 15 yards. And you're like, oh yeah, it's Troy Franklin. We should probably never fully trust him. But for right now, the role is clearly there. And anyone who's been this efficient, who's been very efficient on his targets, on an elite offense, which I think we can call Denver an elite offense at this point, playing over 80% of the snaps and currently ranks top 20 in targets. Anyone who fits into all those buckets just needs to be rostered. You don't have to play them, but should probably be rostered in all formats. After Franklin, I think it's Dobbs. You can throw Wicks into this as well. Jaden Reed going to miss probably the rest of the season with a broken collarbone. That just secures the snaps for Dobbs. At this point, he's going to play 70% of snaps every week, and it'll get Wicks onto the field more. Here's my thing, though. Like, Kraft, we know, is the most valuable pass catcher on the team. Doesn't mean every week he's going to be like, the most targeted, most touchdowns, most yardage, thing like that, but he's the most valuable pass catcher. We know that Golden will probably finish the season as the second most. Right now, he's not, but he's going to get more snaps, more targets as the season goes on. Honestly, Savion Williams has looked really good at times. He's going to get schemed usage. We know that Christian Watson is going to return at some point, probably mid-season. And so it's like, I don't know. Like, again, I think Dobbs is fine in his role. They like using him in the red zone. He's going to get, again, like 70% of the snaps. He should be rostered in most formats. But they are probably still like the most crowded wide receiver room in the league, and they just lost one of their starting wide receivers. Like, I know that feels crazy to say, but no one becomes like a must start because you lose Reed's 5 targets? Okay, you give like half a target to everyone because they have so many players that are going to get a target. And half a target, 0.75 targets, that doesn't do anything for anyone's projection, doesn't make anyone a must start. So I don't think it has the impact that a lot of people are going to think it has, especially when Christian Watson returns. But I do think Romeo Dobbs should be rostered everywhere. I guess in deeper formats, it makes Wicks more appealing because he just has more opportunities to get on the field. But we know at this point, Wicks is not that good. So I'd be more excited in a very deep league about Savion Williams, or if you invested in Golden and you're like, when's it going to happen? It's fast-tracked a little bit more now because he just has more opportunities to get onto the field. And I just think he's going to develop relatively quickly. He's going to command more targets as time goes on. But yeah, even after the injury, like, this wide receiver room is not like it open, right? There's a ton of wide receivers that are there that are going to get looks every week. Then finally, among the tier 2 wide receivers, I think it's Alec Alamaner. Great in camp, great in the preseason, and then he goes out there, 72% or more of snaps in each week, commands 7 and 6 targets over the last 2 weeks. Titans, honestly, it's been impressive. We talked about this last week, like, commands 7 targets against the Broncos, but is inefficient in week 1. And we're like, okay, it's the Broncos, right? The entire offense is going to be inefficient. Offense still didn't look that great, but playing the Rams, another really difficult defense, 6 targets. And, like, obviously that's not amazing, right? But if a guy as a rookie with a rookie quarterback is going to go out there and have 7 and 6 targets with the first 2 weeks, you imagine he's not going to drop down to like 2 and 3. Like, he's probably going to hover in that range. Maybe the role grows, maybe he gets better, maybe the connection gets better, and he's up to like 7, 8, 9 targets in a lot of weeks. Maybe Cam Ward gets better as a player. He gets more efficient, and maybe they're not playing Denver and the Rams every week. So there's a world here where by midseason, end of season, like, he's really clicking, really developing. I think Ridley is good, but I honestly would be a little bit concerned about Ridley, just given how he's kind of looked at times this season. But point being, like, when you have a rookie that's already having this role, clearly wide receiver 2 on the team, and is producing in tough matchups, you got to be rostering them. We know the Titans are going to be trailing most weeks, so there's going to be plenty of passing game scripts, plenty of garbage time. And also, one note, they're not throwing to running backs. Like, I think it's maybe 2 targets over the season to running backs. Like, they are not dumping the running backs at all. I guess Cam Ward just doesn't like doing that. That's great for everyone else. So we'll talk about Chig in a second. It's good for Chig. It's good for Imanner. It's good for Ridley. If they are not going to throw the running back position and you open up like 95% of the targets to wide receivers and tight ends, that is a good thing when you're also a relatively consolidated offense. So I don't know. I think there's going to be some weeks this year where the Titans go off and they have a really good game against weaker opponents or like weaker defenses than, because they're a pretty weak team, but weaker defenses than Denver and the Rams. And when that happens, we're going to have upside here. So I think Alec is a really good kind of speculative ad right now. That's tier 2 for wide receivers. You want to throw on Kayshon Boutte. You want to throw on Isaac Tesla into tier 3. Don't think you need to claim them. Don't think you need to spend any fab on them. Just add them, $0 in fab. Only, I think it was like the 1 or 2 targets for Kayshon Boutte this week, but a weird game, I would say, for New England. Kind of like got up quickly, leaned on the running backs, then the Dolphins came back, but they were like, well, our running backs are actually doing very good. Let's continue leaning on them. We had a lot of scrambles for Drake May. So it was a little bit weird. They're probably going to throw the ball a lot more than they did this last week. But he still comes down with a touchdown. He's still running a ton of routes, using the red zone. So Booty's still a guy, more deep performance go after. And then again, Tesla, I mean, he's just going to command more targets over time. He, I think, ran like 3 routes in week 1. That was up to, I think, 29 or 30 snaps this last week. So we're seeing, or 29 or 30% of the snaps this last week. Role is growing. It's going to grow over time. He'll be using the red zone downfield. Like, again, 10, 12 team league. Are you playing him? Obviously not. But as a last guy on your bench, to see a role expansion on this team, it still has a lot of upside, and especially if there's an injury, his value skyrockets. As far as tier 2 running backs are concerned, I think it's only handcuffs. Like, I'm going to make, people have been asking for it. We had last year kind of like the handcuff rankings. I'm going to make that page soon. I don't know exactly when, but soon. Realistically, you have to understand with handcuffs, so like it all comes down to who gets hurt. Like we're going to rank it based off of like who has the most valuable role if there's an injury, because that's how you want to roster them, right? Because we don't know who gets hurt. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, well, if Breece Hall gets injured, Braylon was the top handcuff to roster, but you can't really predict that, right? I would say right now, amongst handcuffs that are actually available in leagues, I would say Algier behind Bijan is probably the top option. Trey Benson behind James Conner is probably the second option. And then Braylon behind Breece is probably third. Again, among running backs rostered in like less than 6% of leagues. I would say Brian Robinson Jr. is probably the number 1 handcuff in all of fantasy, but I think he's rostered in like 80 to 85% of leagues. So obviously we're not talking about him in this video. But yeah, running back Tuten is the prize at running back this week. If he's not there, just find your favorite handcuff. And again, I'll make that page sometime soon. At tight end, I think there's actually 3 solid options. Again, late round tight end's been pretty good this season. 3 good options behind Juwan, but Juwan is still number 1. I would say Zach Ertz is the top option, then Chigakonkwo, and then Jonnu Smith. Ertz might be turning 35 soon, but the man just played 90% of snaps this last week. He's currently the tight end 2 in half PPR scoring, pending the Monday night games. If Bowers plays and goes off, he could pass him, but he's the tight end 2 in fantasy. He's just been reliable. He's a reliable safety net over the middle of the field, and he's someone to look to in the red zone. And that's really all you can ask for a tight end in fantasy. Who knows if he can stay healthy? Who knows if he's going to kind of break down as the season goes on? But for right now, he's a fantastic option. Chig, I mean, he's played at least 75% of snaps first 2 weeks, 4 and 6 targets. Again, if they're not throwing running backs, it leaves a higher share for tight ends and wide receivers. And Cam Ward's going to develop as a player. And again, Broncos and Rams, 2 tough matchups to start off. I wouldn't say I'm like pumped about Chig, and I would definitely in the short term very much prefer Zach Ertz. But again, long-term upside for Chig. Could he be like a low-end tight end 1 to a high-end tight end 2, someone you're kind of streaming? Maybe. Right now, more of like a speculative ad for him. And then Jonnu, I would say more of a deeper league ad. I don't think there's any speculation there. Like, we know what his role is. It's not really going to grow or go away. He's going to get 4 to 5, sometimes 6 scheme targets each week, or at least targets with most of them being schemed. It'll make them highly efficient. Right now, yards per reception is very low, but the yards per reception will grow. He's going to get usage in the red zone. And so in a deeper league, if you can rely on like 3 to 5 receptions every week, even if you know it's probably only going for like 30 to 40 yards, again, in deeper formats, full PPR, you might take that. Then for quarterback streaming, it's a horrible week, honestly. Like, as I've said before, I'll have the projections up tomorrow. You can kind of just use that to look at kind of quarterbacks you want to roster. But right now, it's gross. Like, hopefully you just kind of have a quarterback you drafted you feel good about. As things stand right now, I'm thinking it's Caleb Williams, number 1 option versus the Cowboys. Russell Wilson behind him versus the Chiefs. Jake Browning, I guess if you lost Joe Burrow, who's going to miss like 3 months here, if you lost him, I guess Jake Browning, but it's at the Vikings, so very much not ideal to go there. And then Sam Darnold versus the Saints. Again, we're going to like streaming against the Saints because the Saints play fast. They'll throw the ball. They'll run a ton of plays, which means the Seahawks should get a ton of plays on offense. And then, of course, he's playing at home. That should help out. So good situation there for Sam Darnold. But none of those are like slam dunk plays. I don't know that any of them will rank in the top 12. So hopefully you have an option. Again, Caleb is probably the best bet versus the Cowboys, just because the Cowboys defense has been very bad. Then finally, defense streaming. You actually have a lot of options, which probably correlates with there's not many streaming options at quarterback because there's a lot of good matchups for defenses here. Again, just look at the rankings and take the top ones there. But among possible options, some of these are rostered in a lot of leagues, but among possible options, you have, in order, Packers at the Browns, Bills versus the Dolphins, Vikings versus the Bengals, again with the Bengals having Jake Browning at quarterback now, Falcons at the Panthers, Seahawks versus the Saints, Colts at the Titans, Jaguars versus the Texans, and then Texans at the Jaguars. You can probably play both defenses in that spot. It is unlikely. Actually, there's probably a 0% chance all of those options are rostered. I would say the Packers and the Vikings are the two I like long-term. So if a lot of these options are there and you're looking for a defense to play for the rest of the season because you hate streaming, I don't think you should do this. I think you should stream. But if you hate doing that, Packers and Vikings are just such good defenses that I'd probably be good playing them in all matchups. But the Falcons might be the prize this week on defense. Like, again, they've looked fantastic. I believe they're rostered in 2% of leagues. So 98 to 99% of you watching this video will have the opportunity to roster the Falcons defense this week. And they play the Panthers. I'm not worried about the Panthers, right? There's going to be a ton of sacks, a ton of opportunities for fumble recoveries, interceptions. They'll be a great play this week. And honestly, it seems like the investments have worked for the Falcons defense. The pass rush is absolutely getting there. They're being really aggressive on defense. I love it. Again, if they're 2% rostered, it means most of you can get them. So they are probably the number one that I would go after, because if they look at good again this week, we might be saying that they're an option to roster every week on defense. I still think the Vikings and the Packers are the two that are like the streaming or the non-streaming, I guess, the ones you can stream every single week on their own. But it's a possibility the Falcons are as well. We will see. But at minimum this week, they're a great play. I would definitely go after them. All right. That's how I'm seeing the waiver wire this week. Rest of season rankings will be live tomorrow, along with the week 3 rankings and projections. So make sure you check both of them out when making your waiver moves this week. You can see both on my website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. I'll be back Wednesday to go over the top trade targets, Thursday to go over week 3 rankings, and then Friday to go over my favorite underdog plays this week. That, my friends, will do it for this one. Please subscribe if you are new here, and thanks for watching.